Dr. Harriet Fraad is host of Capitalism Hits Home. It's not just in your head. And we were just talking about there. I know you want to talk about a lot, but the fatalism. When we see that 30 million Americans by the end of this week will be living under triple-digit temperatures, it almost feels insolvable. Insoluble? Insolvable.
Yeah, insoluble.
Yeah. What do you say to people who think, what's the point? It's over.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening right now is the American empire is over. And a lot of things are over. The idea that if you were white and in a family headed by a male, your kids could do better than you economically, that's over. The idea that your job stability will be there for you, that's over. The idea that your marriage will be there for you, that's over. The idea that if you're young and you get educated or trained, you'll get a stable job, that's over. So I think that people, because they don't have a really organized together movement to give them hope for what to do now that our empire is over, have a level of fatalism that's really sad. And they have all the kind of symptoms that go with it, the celebrity worship, because you've given up that your own life could be exciting. You could merge with somebody else's and therefore get the thrills of someone with possibilities. You could see people fighting for Britney Spears, as I talked about, because she had a hope she could get out of her super exploitation. And a lot of people don't know that they could. There's,
So the danger of losing the empire, the danger of losing our personal status, we project that onto the nation and say, okay, our country has lost its status. Somebody comes along and says, we're going to bring this country back to its former glory. And with this country's former glory comes your own sense of self-worth.
Right. For a lot of people.
I'm sorry?
A lot of the lonely people who are Trump devotees go from one rally to another to have somebody to bond with in hope. But I think most Americans don't understand that the empire is over. They don't even know that we lost the war in Vietnam, no less Afghanistan and Iraq. But it's in the air, a kind of failure and an unconscious realization the party is over. The America hegemonic party is over. And we could have a wonderful nation of sharing and possibility without trying to conquer the globe and having 130 nations with our troops. And we could have a lot of things if we shared. But there is a fatalism until you realize you can do something about it. Just general defeat.
There's an inevitability to this because of the more than $1 trillion a year we spend on the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. When you spend $1 trillion that we know of on weapons that don't work, not on the soldiers, not on the VA, on
the VA, on weapons and camps that are hated and so on.
So when you're spending that kind of money, you have to convince the American people that we have either enemies who want to take us over, or that we're the indispensable nation abroad. If we don't spend $1 trillion on defense, China will take over.
That's
and
right.
Push, and we can't allow that.
That's right.
So the $1 trillion becomes an act of generosity.
And
it's almost paternalism.
It's also an act of security, that we are secure. Of course, a bunch of hooligans and fascists could take over the Capitol, which causes some alarm, but that there's a sense we do have some protection somewhere. And of course we don't. And what you need to do in order to justify that huge expenditure, because we are first in the world only in weapons, is to convince people there's an enemy. Russia's now capitalist, so they're working on China. China has never invaded anybody. They're whipping up the anger at the Uyghurs, or the Uyghurs, however you pronounce it, as a Muslim community. They're discriminated against after the United States has just killed over 6 million Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Muslims were banned from the country under our former president, and so on. That, whoa, we're hardly got a pedestal to stand on as far as Muslim protection. But, you know, they are always bashing China because China is the new excuse for the military, even though China has never invaded any other country. It is authoritarian. I'm not saying they're perfect. I don't think so. But
well, they've invaded Tibet.
Well, that was part of their country, just like Hong Kong was theirs. It was promised, it was given to Britain because they lost the Opium Wars. And as of 1999, it belonged back.
You're talking about Hong Kong. I'm talking about Tibet.
Okay, I know. But I mean, I think Tibet was once part of their country too. And I think that the United States has a history of invading everywhere.
Right.
The Chinese don't. They have their roads and bridges program to cross China. They have 12 high-speed trains. We have none, and so on. But they are trying to build China as an enemy because they have to have an excuse for the reason that the U.S. economy is failing, and also that we need to arm ourselves.
And they've weaponized COVID, from what I've been reading, and I don't know that much about COVID, but the conversation about the lab leak.
Yeah,
is they're accusing, they want to look into, they being the right wing, right. They want to look into whether or not this came from the lab weaponizing COVID. Well, who's weaponizing COVID when you talk that way? You're weaponizing COVID. You're trying to make China the culprit in all this, so that we go to war with China. The people who support military spending and who support a permanent state of war are the ones who are promoting the lab leak theory, which is a theory, and it's all circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because really, the United States is falling behind China in every other area except weapons production and war. And that's what they're trying to push, because, you know, the Chinese revolution took 800 million people out of poverty. More and more people are entering poverty in the United States all the time. And the way they handled COVID was amazing. They wiped it out in Wuhan. Within a couple of weeks, they built 11 hospitals. Everyone was tested, tracked, and helped. That shocking that we are being outcompeted on every level except military. And so they're trying to push the military. And it's sick because, you know, they have 1.3 something billion people. And it's not going to be, usually we conquer places that have no air force, and they are a powerful country. They are fast becoming the first economic power of the world, and they are already the second, even though in 1949, when they had their revolution, they were decimated. You know, they were decimated from a civil war, from a brutal invasion by Japan, and they've done an amazing job. And even though, you know, I am not a proponent of authoritarianism, they have provided for their people. Between the 1970s and now, the American workers' wages are flat as inflation has gone down. So that instead of being able to support a dependent wife and children, wage earning men can't barely support themselves, and men and women together can't make the living a man did before in terms of the real wages, what they could actually buy. China's wages have gone up 4 times since then, which is how they could liberate those 800 million people from poverty. And so
Henry Akamaki said to me that we love to say that capitalism in the past 20 years has lifted billions of people out of poverty. But if you take China out of that equation, it hasn't lifted anybody out of poverty. And
in our country, people are getting more and more poverty stricken.
Right. So if you take China out of the equation, because China is not a capitalist nation.
No, it is not.
So then if you can only say that capitalism has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty if you include China, but China is not capitalism.
No, it isn't. It's a highly regulated economy, and it's a mixture. They have a capitalist element, but it's like a socialism, not capitalist.
Right.
It is highly controlled. And so that, of course, we haven't. How many people have we placed in poverty? Africa was a prosperous nation. People farmed, they had a decent life. And the imperialist nations came in, took their land, and forced them into poverty and servitude. Really, that's just a bogus argument that history doesn't support at all.
Right.
And the United States now is in a downward spiral. And I think people have a fatalism because they sense that it's all out of control. They don't feel that their voices count in elections because millions of jobs were exported. People came back to the United States and bought our for sale political system. And so they don't feel their voices count. And now some people are beginning to get activated on the climate, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and Time's Up, and transsexuals and homosexuals are becoming empowered. But there is no central force. You'd need to have an umbrella where the umbrella stem, the handle, the big long handle is class solidarity. And connected to that are all the other struggles, whether it's climate or Black Lives Matter or women's rights or abortion rights or transsexual rights or homosexual rights or whatever. But right now, those things are like jigsaw puzzles on a table that haven't come together. And so that people can just feel lost. A prime example, which is so sad, was written up by the Case and Deaton studies, where they found swaths of white women in the South die much earlier than Black women. And they die deaths of despair. I think the book on those studies is called Deaths of Despair, as well as all those deaths from ODs, which have gone up 30% of overdose. And COVID. And
our life expectancy is going down.
That's right.
Worse than any industrialized nation.
And our child mortality is going up as our life expectancy is going down. We're below Cuba, like a third world country because of our profit-driven healthcare. Capitalism is wrecking this place. And I think some people feel empowered by it. There's much more movement happening now than was 50 years ago. And there's also great despair. Look, over the 4th of July weekend, 618 people were injured by gunfire, being shot, and 230 were killed. They were all killed by men. Now, what's happened to men that they should be so murderous? And I think it's that they were the providers if they were white men, and they're overwhelmingly white men doing the shooting. They were citizens in their community. They had a job they could count on. They had a wife they could count on to take care of them sexually and do their housework and bring up their kids. And they had a certain status, and they've lost it. And like a microcosm of the country. They don't know what to do about it except to go to the most destructive arms manufacturer NRA solution to be a man, to be able to have a gun, that you can shoot people. You have that power to kill, which is a last resort. And it's very much advertised by the gun dealers. I think I've mentioned before, but it really is so startling, that ad that they had for the Bushmaster automatic weapon. Does your wife or girlfriend earn more money than you? Revoke your man card. Do you prefer tofu to meat? Revoke your man card. And it goes down, and then there's a big picture of the Bushmaster automatic. Reinstate your man card. It's so.
And what a name, the Bushmaster.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Mastering the bushes of all your girlfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah. At any rate, there is this. What's happening in the United States is, on the one hand, there is a despair and passivity. On the other hand, there's more activism than we've known for 50 years, both on the left and also on the right, where people are looking for somebody to blame for America's failure. And they're looking for everyone who's beneath what the white male used to be: minorities, women, immigrants.
It's a pivotal moment in American history. We didn't dodge a bullet with Trump. He's still there. And that strain of
fascism, really,
or Peronism. I'm worried about Peronism, because Peron offered something to his people. That is the problem with somebody like Peron, where they recognize that the people are suffering, and here's a city, here's food, I'm going to feed you. And the Democrats, if they don't go big, if they don't do it now with the infrastructure bill and getting rid of the filibuster, if they don't go big, what's going to happen in October is they're going to be outflanked on the left, what the faux left, by the Republicans. You have people like Josh Hawley, who is a dangerous senator from Missouri who believes in a theocracy. He's a crazy evangelical Christian who's on record. He came out of Yale Law School, and he is on record saying the rule of law is what Christ says it is. These are dangerous people. Ted Cruz is part of it.
Christ says it is.
I'm sorry?
And rather what I say.
Right.
Christ says it was. Not what Christ says it was, because who knows? But
right.
He does.
I say what Christ, right. And he's writing books about breaking up big tech. Well, that's the left that should be writing books about breaking up big tech. And all it takes is the Republican Party to come out in favor, to say they're in favor of something like Medicare for all, free health care. We're going to.
But, Trump is a little different from Peron and other fascists. He actually didn't deliver. He said he was going to get rid of the swamp. He hired it instead. He said, that he would stop the forever wars. He didn't. He didn't deliver anything except a chance to hate other people and get your rage out that you're no longer the dominant person in the society. And that was a lot. People loved it.
So what we have to worry about is the Republicans giving to the working class, giving their version of welfare and food to the working class, or at least promising that. And then it's over. Then this country is over, and we have nobody to blame other than Joe Biden, the vice president, Hillary Clinton, and the Obamas.
And the whole Democratic Party.
The
pay-to-play idea.
Yeah.
Which is
right now. If they don't move now, this summer, I think it's over.
Yeah, well, it's over. And what may happen is that perhaps the left will get it together instead of monitoring each other's microaggressions and unite and march and demand change and demand a socialist party, because that's also a possibility. Because, the Republicans didn't deliver. All they delivered was a chance to hate, which was very compelling.
And to the richest one, the tax cuts.
They did a lot for them. That's, what did I read? 25 American billionaires made $401 billion during the pandemic, when 60% of America at least had some unemployment and therefore some cut in their wages for a while. But people are desperate and they don't, they hold on to these little distinctions, that they were born in the US, that their color is white, that they're male. And that Trump gave them. And so
the lying that our leaders do, where they talk about stability and that this fake optimism. Roosevelt said, I see a nation ill-fed, ill-clad. I see a starving nation.
Right.
When Joe Biden got inaugurated, he had she was great, the African-American Harvard poet whose mother was a single mother, and she came from, I believe it was South Central. And now she's got some kind of deal with somebody at Netflix. I don't know if I want to hear, that's false optimism to listen to a beautiful, brilliant poet who comes from South Central, who's going to Harvard. I want to hear a president say, I see a nation that's ill-clad and starving.
That's right. The 1 in 4 kids who doesn't get enough to eat.
That's who should be speaking at your inauguration.
And whoever should be speaking, he likes to make cheap gestures, but it's delivering that he has to do. Delivering to stop that tax cut to those billionaires and deliver the care infrastructure and the infrastructure like FDR did. FDR created all sorts of dams and roads and bridges in the Civilian Conservation Corps because the government hired the people. They didn't have some contractor who is an enormously billionaire capitalist hire people and try to give them the least he can and get away with a big profit. It was the government who hired them, and the government would have to hire people. And that is something that Biden is not going to do because he's corporate. So that there would have to be a powerful movement, a powerful left movement that people could connect to and that could deliver. That would be what we'd have to do because the Democratic Party won't deliver. They have the same corporate sponsors as the Republican Party.
Ronald Reagan began this tradition of turning State of the Unions into, game shows where there'd be somebody in the bleachers, stand up and take a bow. This is a security guard who threw himself on a hand grenade at Walmart and saved 20 lives. Aren't they great? And they stand up. And this has been going on for 40 years where the president introduces all these great Americans. We never get to meet. This is a single mother of 2 who's done. I'm sorry?
Yes, struggling. These are the people that are struggling in our nation.
They don't get the invite to the State of the Union. Not once.
No.
How many jobs do you have, ma'am? I have 3. And can you afford rent? No, I can't. Right,
exactly.
It's that fake optimism you've written about and talked about.
Cruel optimism. It's a promise you won't.
Cruel optimism, did you say?
Cruel optimism. Yes, that it's a promise that you won't be able to fulfill, and therefore you will be a loser. you will be at fault, because the idea that your kids will do better than you, for the mass of people, there are always exceptions, but the mass of people, that will not be true. Two people working full time as a couple can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment in any city, state, or county in the whole United States if they're working at minimum wage.
You need $25 an hour to be able to afford to rent.
Right, to rent. Oh, that's right. And so I think what you have done is, for a long time, America had this optimism. If you just work hard and you're white and in your family, they didn't mention this part, headed by a male, you will do okay. You will be secure. Your kids will have more than you. And that's been withdrawn ever since the mid to late 70s. And so people are completely at loss and depressed. And that is why on July 4th, celebration of our nation, 230 people were murdered by people, and 618 were injured by shots, because people were reclaiming their power in that narcissistic, macho way, where you don't imagine how the people will feel when they're shot, or how their kids will feel, or the people who cared for them. You're just showing you're a man, and you're getting revenge. We're in terrible, terrible shape. And I think a responsible politician would say, look, we're in shit shape. And this is what we've got to do to rescue ourselves.
Yes.
And then profits for corporations, even in your plans that are noble, that you won't even make sure pass.
To be continued. Thank you so much. How do people contact you if they need therapy, which we all need?
Well, they could email me at hfraud@gmail.com, or they could go to my website, harrietfraud.com.
Great. We love you. Thank you. And there were some hands raised. I didn't get to them. Dr. Harriet Fraud is the host of Capitalism Hits Home, and it's not just in your head.
Which I do with Max Golding. It's not just in your head.
Right. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week, I hope.
Yes, indeed.
Fantastic.